Hello and welcome to today's webinar, which is all about how to support your apprentices in the workplace. My name is Paula Gibson and I'm going to take you through 20 minutes worth of an overview of the things you can do to best support your apprentice in the workplace. The first section is all about what's new about apprenticeships, and then the second one is around how can you prepare your apprentices for their endpoint assessment. So just recapping briefly, what is new about apprenticeships? Well, we know that a few years ago, the government completely reformed the way apprenticeships are designed and delivered. So the apprenticeships now are written by employers and they are now described as apprenticeship standards, which means each standard is linked to an individual job role, of which there's over 900, and they all are designed to achieve an expected level of knowledge, skills and behaviour. What's very, very different about the new apprenticeship system is the introduction of an independent endpoint assessment at the end of the apprenticeship. So another thing that is quite different is that on average, an apprenticeship now is 12 to 18 months. You cannot complete an apprenticeship in less than 12 months. It's really, really important. The first aspect when you join an apprenticeship programme is to make sure that you have the right qualifications in order to start the apprenticeship. So it could be something like, do you have the right level of English and maths? If you don't, then obviously that's going to have to be worked through at the start of the apprenticeship journey. So the first thing to do is to really make sure that it's the right apprenticeship programme and you match all of the knowledge, skills and behaviours in order for you to actually achieve your apprenticeship at the end. So at the end of the on-programme phase, which we describe it as, we get through to what is described as the gateway. So the gateway is the point of which your line manager, the apprentices and the training provider will all agree that you are ready to enter the actual endpoint assessment. And then the endpoint assessment phase is a whole range of different testing methodologies. So it could be anything from a portfolio, a professional discussion that you have with the independent assessors, something around a practical observation, and then the final award. I think it's important to say here that the endpoint assessment is conducted by somebody that you probably would not have met before, and in essence I would describe it very much in the same way as you would do a driving test. So when you do a driving test, you're trained by a driving instructor, but actually when you do your test, you're tested by an instructor that you've never met before. So let's talk about the Level 3 Operational Delivery Officer in particular and how you as a line manager can support your staff on their learner journey. I think it's really important right from the start that you have a very successful induction. It's very important that your apprentices understand the job role, almost like an induction to the department, what people do, the structures, the hierarchies. You also need to know as a line manager what the detail of what your apprentices programme actually looks like. So what are the different modules, when do they have to be submitted, really get under the skin of actually what the content is that they will be working through. And I think it's really important to offer that mentoring support, and we'll come back to that in a little bit later on. Familiarise yourself with the endpoint assessment because everything about the apprenticeship journey is geared towards the endpoint assessment. So whether it's a work-based project or being able to talk about their experience during the endpoint assessment discussion, everything is geared towards that endpoint. So be really clear and close to the detail right from the get-go. I think your role as a line manager is to make sure that you stay involved. You know, it's not just the role of the apprenticeship training provider to ensure a successful completion. The line manager has a pivotal role to play. Ensure that you know the opportunities where your apprentice can really showcase their skills, knowledge and behaviours in order to meet what's in the standard. So it's things like, are they being given the right opportunities to visit other departments, shadowing, you know, looking at other things like one-to-one meetings, you know, how are they progressing, really, you know, allow this opportunity for the apprentice to really get out there across the departments and being able to share exactly how they can meet those individual knowledge, skills and behaviours that are in the ops delivery standard. Make sure that you get involved in some of the meetings with the line managers, with the training providers, and just make sure that there's enough time within the working week for your apprentice to complete all of the necessary qualifications before endpoint assessment. It could be functional skills if they don't have that as well. So the mentor is somebody who can provide that sort of coaching and mentoring alongside their apprenticeship journey. They could open doors for work shadowing opportunities. It could be somebody who could really give some good insight to a particular topic or subject area for their assignments. It could be another line manager. It could be anybody who has a real good grasp of the organisation that can really help and develop that particular apprentice. In many organisations, ex-apprentices actually play that role, which I think is a very successful way of making sure that they have a really high quality experience. And of course, you can be the mentor as well. So what is a good mentor? It's about being able to share what you know, really, being able to sort of draw on your experience and impart that onto an apprentice, be available for meetings, make sure that you're approachable, that you're listening to the views, and be honest and tactful. If you've got some really constructive feedback, then I think a good mentor will provide that feedback. So practical mentoring tips, obviously I think it's all about the preparation. So I think the apprentice's role is to make sure that they are managing what they want to get out of the mentoring experience. Your apprentice needs to not waste time and really think about what they want to get out of that conversation, bearing in mind that we know that mentoring, the role of mentors, their time is quite precious. Agree how they're going to work together. So it could be that they have an hourly meeting a week. It could be something more formal across a month, for example. Establish what each party wants to get out of the meeting. Establish ground rules. That's really important for things like confidentiality. And then the final thing around mentoring is, how can they help provide opportunities for really getting under the skin of how they can work within the organisation and actually progress confidently through their apprenticeship journey by having the right experiences within the business to showcase their skills. So again, just building on the last point, this is all around, well, how can your apprentices make sure that they've got the right exposure to meet the knowledge, skills and behaviours that are in the apprenticeship? Well, again, it's about being really organised. So using things like e-portfolios to record some of the activities that are happening, any evidence that they have. So things like feedback from PDR, so that's performance development reviews, anything they've got from customers who fed back on how they handled a particular issue. I think other evidence is around, how the three-way meetings are going with the line manager and the training provider and the apprentice, looking at agreed development plans, if there are any issues, what steps you're going to put in place to make sure that they're dealt with. And then just keep a sense check, making sure that the role that they're doing, the job role that they're doing day to day meets what's in the required standard. There's no point in them being exposed to tasks and duties that isn't part of the apprenticeship programme, because they will really struggle to actually evidence that at the end of the programme. So in some cases, some apprentices may need help with maths and English if they haven't got a GCSE at level C, or in the new system, which is grade 4-5, then they will be required to undertake a level 2 functional skills, maths and English. You as a line manager will need to support them, and there's lots of tools available through our e-functional school tools kit, for example, where apprentices can almost start to test themselves to see exactly where they are at in terms of levels and where they need to focus their efforts. So the whole functional skills piece is quite new. It has recently been reformed, and it does pretty much match a GCSE level, so they will need some support and time in order to get that right. The off-the-job element is something that you as a line manager can really support them. So the off-the-job is not part of their day-to-day duties. It's actually part of something that they will need to do away from their day-to-day duties in order to complete whatever they need to do outside of that. So it could be things like qualifications, it could be some other formal learning. For most part, what line managers do is sit down at the very start of the apprenticeship and actually work out what that off-the-job activities actually look like on a week-by-week basis, and then keeping a log of that as well. So as well as the formal qualifications, and maybe in some cases they have to get sit exams and things like that, there are other creative, practical ways in which you can classify an off-the-job activity. So work shadowing was a classic one, visiting a different site, for example, observational work in a different department. So there's lots of creative ways in which you can support the apprentice by giving them this opportunity to experience the off-the-job element. So again, all of these activities here just count as off the job. I think it's a great way to really get them to reflect on what they've learned during the week, and then get the opportunity to practice that in a sort of simulated exercise or role plays. It could be something around how to negotiate or how to communicate with the different departments, overcoming obstruction. All of that stuff can really be counted as off the job. And also attendance at industry events. I mean, networking, going to external trade shows, etc., all will count as off the job. But it's important that you record it, because for auditing purposes, it's really important that regulatory bodies can see exactly how you're supporting that. So let's just talk about how you support your apprentice in the round. So the first one, the training provider's role is to support the apprentice both face-to-face and remotely. They will be organising regular one-to-ones. It could be 6 weekly visits, it could be more. There will be dedicated support from a mentoring the workplace, plus coaching as well from you as a line manager, and also colleagues. Do continue at the formal regular performance review process as you would with any member of staff. And I think, certainly stay on top of the joint visits between the line manager and the provider to make sure that they're on track and they're not missing key milestones, whether that's submitting pieces of coursework or whatever. And then obviously the on-the-job support from the line manager is a continuous cycle. So endpoint assessment is a significant part of the apprentice. So after a minimum of 12 months, then obviously, as I said before, the line manager, the apprentice and the training provider will all agree and sign an agreement that they're ready to go through to endpoint assessment. And it's things like making sure that everything's being completed before that happens. So have they met the functional skills? Have they gained the necessary qualifications that was part of the standard, for example? So obviously there's a really important event that happens, which is around signing the gateway declaration. And the thing is to say endpoint assessment isn't an option. It's not something that people can opt out of. They have to complete it in order to get their apprenticeship certificate. So the endpoint assessment for this particular standard includes a work-based project, a presentation and a Q&A, and a professional discussion. So one of the things I would urge you to do as a line manager is familiarise yourself now with our City and Guilds endpoint assessment pack. There's so much resources in there that you can really familiarise yourself with now, so you understand exactly what the expectation is of your apprentice. So the work-based project, so it's compiled after the completion of the 12-month apprenticeship. And obviously the project scope, the title, the subject will need to be agreed between yourself and the apprentice and submitted to us for approval. It's about 2,500 words, and it must be able to represent the skills, knowledge and behaviours set out into the operations delivery level 3 standard. So you will need to help them provide some time in order for them to prepare, but also get involved in actually coming up with a really good scope of a project that actually apply and impact on real tangible benefits. So the work-based project, there's some information there about some guidelines, the training provider can help them and guide through it as well. Do read through that at your leisure. And similarly, some of the themes are listed below. So for me, try to encourage them to do a project that has some real tangible business benefits to a particular department, because that way you will really start to see how the apprenticeship is working. So again, this is all around the work-based project and presentation. I think practice, practice, and practice is the key to success in anything when it comes to things like this. So make sure your apprentice starts early with gathering potential ideas for their project. Think about how they might want to showcase that, and think about some of the outputs that they want to talk about in terms of business improvements, etc. Do read this part in your leisure. This is around the evidence which must be provided as part of the build up towards the endpoint assessment. And you can help your apprenticeship prepare for their endpoint assessment. We have developed an endpoint assessment preparation tool. That's a free to use tool which will help them practice things like professional discussion. They can start to really practice that, which I think can be quite daunting if they've never met a person before. It almost feels like a bit of a job interview. Give them sufficient time to compile their project. And I think the final thing to say is that, this is, the endpoint assessment is not to be cancelled. It is the final driving test. So I think the only thing to say is make sure that you get to celebrate success. So after the endpoint assessment, the results will be forwarded by City and Guilds. The apprentice will receive a very nicely put together City and Guilds statement of achievement. And City and Guilds will claim a full apprenticeship certificate from the Institute for Apprenticeship. So in essence, there will be two certificates really, one a statement of achievement from us and one from the actual Institute for Apprenticeships, who are the governing body of apprenticeships. We cannot give grades and feedback on the day, but the results will be with you and the apprentice within a very short period after that. And finally, your apprentice is counting on you. This is a very exciting time. It's a very exciting time for apprenticeships and how they've now been sort of reformed, I suppose, to give that professionalism by the way they're delivered and funded and ultimately assessed by an independent assessor. So I think it's a really good time for you as a line manager to get involved. You can also contact your training provider in the first instance at any time during the journey, but I think it's really a good opportunity for you to get involved as a line manager. And thank you for listening, and I look forward to delivering a session with you all again soon.